I'm here with the second part of Mrs. Barr Has Gone Too Far from the My Weirderest School series by Dan Gutman, illustrated by Jim Paylott, published by Harper's. And I'm Miss Melissa at the Oosterhout Free Library. Guest teacher, Mrs. Barr, is trying to trick the class into learning about geography. I love travel, said Andrea, who loves everything I hate. Me too, said Emily, who agrees with everything Andrea says. Traveling allows you to experience other cultures, said Mr. Klutz. Other cultures are boring, I said. Get to try new foods, said Mr. Cooper. New foods are yucky, I said. Don't you want to become a well-rounded person, Arlo? Asked Andrea. I'd rather be a triangle, I told her. Well, by the end of the week, said Mrs. Barr, I think you're going to change your mind. And you kids are going to learn lots about geography. This was going to be the worst week in the history of weeks. We were in Mr. Cooper's class that afternoon working on a boring writing exercise. Pencils down, said Mr. Cooper. It's time for phys ed. Yay! Phys ed is my favorite subject. We walked 1,100,000 miles to the gym. Do you think we'll have relay races today? Neil asked as we walked down the hall. Maybe we're going to climb the ropes, said Ryan. Our phys ed teacher's Mrs. Small. One time she fell out of a tree and broke her leg. That's from the book Miss Small is Off the Wall. When we got to the gym, we saw the weirdest thing in the history of the world. There's a giant map that covered the whole floor, and the gym is big. What's up with the map? I asked Miss Small. We have an exciting activity today, she replied, and you'll never believe who walked into the door at that moment. Nobody. It would hurt if you walked into the door. Didn't we cover this in chapter 2? But you'll never believe who walked into the doorway. It was Mrs. Barr. She had her globe and suitcase with her. Do you mind if I open a window? She asked. Go right ahead, said Miss Small. What's our activity? Asked Alexis. We're going to have a globe-trotting adventure, said Mrs. Barr. We're going to play basketball, I said. Cool. There's a basketball team, a trick basketball team called the Harlem Globetrotters. Not that kind of globe-trotting, dumbhead, Andrea told me. I was going to say something mean to Andrea, but I didn't have the chance because Mrs. Barr and Miss Small led us over to part of the giant map. They were standing on the United States. Mrs. Barr gathered everyone around her like she was in a football team in a huddle. She lowered her voice as if she had a big secret. There's something fishy going on, she whispered. Huh? Why is everybody always talking about fish? An international jewel thief is on the run, Mrs. Barr whispered. We've got to catch him. How are we going to do that? Asked Emily. He left a series of clues that will tell us where he is, whispered Mrs. Barr. Look, there's the first clue. She went over and picked up a piece of yellow paper that was taped to the floor. She unfolded it and showed it to us. I'm hiding out near a clock called Big Ben, Mr. E. Big Ben is in London. That's right, said Mrs. Barr. Let's go to England. We'll have to swim across the Atlantic Ocean, said Miss Small. Everybody get down and swim. We got on the floor and we pretended to swim across the ocean. It's hard to swim without water. Mrs. Barr said we swam over 3,000 miles. Okay, we're in London, England, said Mrs. Barr, and look, there's Big Ben. And there's another clue, shouted Ryan. Mrs. Barr picked up another piece of yellow paper. This is what it said. I'm hiding out in the smallest country in the world, Mr. E. Rhode Island, I shouted. Mr. E is in Rhode Island. Rhode Island isn't a country, Arlo, said Andrea, rolling her eyes. I knew that, I lied. The smallest country in the world is Vatican City, shouted Andrea. It's in the middle of Rome, Italy. That's right, shouted Mrs. Barr. Andrea smiled the smile she smiles to let everyone know that she knows something nobody else knows. "Let's go!" shouted Mrs. Barr. "Quickly! To Italy! Mr. E. has stolen millions of dollars in jewelry. We've got to catch him." "Italy is so romantic," said Andrea. "Wouldn't you love to go to Italy, Arlo?" "They have pizza there, right?" I asked. "Yes, the best pizza in the world," said Andrea. "I want to go there," I said. "Pizza is my favorite food." "Ooh," said Ryan. AJ and Andrea are talking about taking a trip to Italy together. They must be in love. "Maybe you two can go to Italy in your honeymoon," said Michael. I was going to say something mean to the guys, but we all ran over to Italy on the map, shaped like a boot. No one knows why. "Look!" shouted Mrs. Barr. "Here's another clue. I'm hiding out in a continent that has more people than all the other continents put together." "I think it's Asia," said Ryan. "That's right," shouted Mrs. Barr. "Let's go there." We all ran to Asia. It's really big and it has lots of countries in it. "Look, another clue!" shouted Mrs. Barr. "I'm hiding out on a boat in the largest ocean in the world, Mr. E." "The Pacific is the largest ocean," Michael yelled. "That's right," shouted Mrs. Barr. "Let's go there." "This is good exercise," said Miss Small. "Run!" We all ran over to the Pacific Ocean. While we were running there, out of the corner of my eye, I saw somebody going into the locker room at the other end of the gym. "Who's that?" I asked. "It could be Mr. E," shouted Neil. We all ran over to the locker room. Some guy was hiding behind the door. He was wearing a trench coat, a hat, and a pair of glasses with a fake nose under them. "Freeze, dirtbag!" I shouted. "You're under arrest, Mr. E." "On what charge?" he asked, putting his hands up in the air. "Stealing millions of dollars worth of jewels," Ryan said. "I'm innocent," shouted Mr. E. "I didn't steal a thing." Michael pulled off Mr. E's hat. Alexia pulled off his fake nose and glasses. And you'll never believe in 1,100,000 years who Mr. E turned out to be. I'm not going to tell you. Okay, I'll tell you. It was Mrs. Rupee, our librarian. We all gasped. "Mrs. Rupee," I shouted. "You're Mr. E?" "Rupee?" said Mrs. Rupee, running out the doorway. "Never heard of her." That was weird. "You kids did a great job finding Mr. E," said Mrs. Barr. "See, you know more geography than you think." We walked 100 million miles back to our classroom. "Bummer in the summer," I said as we walked down the hall. "I thought Mr. E was going to be a real international jewel thief. He turned out to be Mrs. Rupee in one of her disguises." "It's just a scavenger hunt, Arlo," said Andrea. "Mrs. Barr made up all those clues as a way to teach us geography." "I knew that," I lied. I hate it when grown-ups sneak learning in while we're trying to have fun. They think we don't notice. I can't believe I fell for it. It's not fair. I could hardly sleep that night. I kept thinking about how Mrs. Barr tricked us into learning geography. It makes me so mad. No way am I going to fall for that again. The next day, Mr. Cooper didn't even try to teach us math. As soon as he saw Mrs. Barr come into the class with her suitcase, he closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead. He sure rubs his forehead a lot. I guess he needs to moisturize. "Konnichiwa," Mrs. Barr said as she went over and opened the window. That means hello in Japanese. "Have you visited Japan?" said Andrea. "I've been there many times," Mrs. Barr replied. "Japan is amazing." "How about the United States?" asked Ryan. "Have you traveled around our country?" "Sure," she replied. "I've been all over America. It is amazing." "Did you go to the Grand Canyon?" asked Emily. "No," replied Mrs. Barr. "How about Mount Rushmore?" asked Alexia. "Nope, but I went to the Spam Museum in Minnesota." "What? There's a museum about Spam?" Ryan asked. "Oh, yes," said Mrs. Barr. "It is amazing. Did you know Spam stands for spiced ham?" Now, Arlo has a little note here. I thought it stood for something posing as meat. I also visited the largest ball of twine in the world. It's in Kansas and it's over 10 feet tall. It is amazing. Wait, Mrs. Barr has never been to the Grand Canyon or Mount Rushmore, but she's visited the Span Museum and a giant ball of twine? That lady's weird. Let's talk about geography, said Mrs. Barr. I know something about geography, said little Miss Know-it-all. The word geography comes from ancient Greece. It means to write or describe the earth. I didn't know that, said Mrs. Barr. Andrea smiled the smile that she smiles to let everyone know she knows something no one else knows. Well, if you want to be able to smile the smile that lets everyone know she knows something nobody else knows, you should come to the library. That's where you can find out just about everything. I'll see you next time from the Oosterhout Free Library with the next part of Mrs. Barr Has Gone Too Far.